Hello, everyone. So there have been claims of one big batch of ballots coming into Pennsylvania count that delivered 100% for Biden. That's the sort of percentage you get with North Korean politics. Also, a claim from a postal worker that was instructed to predate stamp mail bound for Michigan. And right now, Trump is contesting Michigan as well as Pennsylvania, and that is going to go to court now. And we find it kind of funny. Why in the world is people allowed to keep on counting ballots? And why are they allowed to stop the polling previously to the time frame allotted?
Well, because people are really happy with the job we've done. But you know what? We won't know. We might not know for months because these ballots are going to be all over. Take a look at what happened in Manhattan. Take a look at what happened in New Jersey. Take a look at what happened in Virginia and other places. They're not losing 2%, 1%, which, by the way, is too much. An election could be won or lost with that. They're losing 30 and 40%. It's a fraud, and it's a shame. And can you imagine where they say you have to have your ballot in by November 10th? November 10th. That means that's 7 days after the election, in theory, should have been announced.
Okay.
We have major states with that.
Sir,
all run by Democrats.
2 minutes is 2 minutes.
All run by Democrats. It's
President Trump,
it's a rigged election.
you're going to be able to continue. You have been charging for months that mail-in balloting is going to be a disaster. You say it's rigged, that it's going to lead to fraud. But in 2018, in the last midterm election, 31 million people voted mail-in voting. That was a quarter, more than a quarter of all the voters that year cast their ballots by mail. Now that millions of mail-in ballots have gone out, what are you going to do about it? And are you counting on the Supreme Court, including a Justice Barrett, to settle any dispute?
Yeah, I think I'm counting on them to look at the ballots, definitely. I hope we don't need them in terms of the election itself. But for the ballots, I think so. Because what's happening is incredible. I read today, where at least 1% of the ballots for 2016 were invalidated. They take them, we don't like them.
But what are you going to do about it? There are millions of ballots going out right now.
What you do is you go and vote. You do a solicited ballot, and that's okay, or you go and vote.
I'm asking you about the fact that millions of people...
You go and vote. You go and vote.
But what I'm saying is, what are you going to do about the fact that millions of people...
You either do, Chris, a solicited ballot where you're sending it in, they're sending it back, and you're sending... They have mailmen with lots of it. Did you see what's going on? Take a look at West Virginia, mailmen selling the ballots. They're being sold. They're being dumped in rivers. This is a horrible thing for our country. This is not going to end well. This is not going to end well.
5 states have had mail-in ballots for the last decade or more. 5, including 2 Republican states. And you don't have to solicit the ballot. It's sent to you. It's sent to your home. What they're saying is that it has to be a postmark by election day. If it doesn't get in till the 7th, 8th, 9th, it still should be counted. He's just afraid of counting the votes because
You're wrong.
I want to continue with you on this, Vice President Biden.
Chris, he's so wrong when he makes a statement like that.
Excuse me.
With the mail-in ballots that the Democrats pushed so heavily, they allowed themselves more time to crank up the volume on the votes. And we have a real hard time believing that there were that many people that enthusiastic about going and seeing Biden be president of the United States. We're just very confused as to why anyone would have wanted that so badly that enough people would come in and vote for Joe Biden, let alone in particular states where he should not have won. Nevada is one where we think there should be some kind of contesting as well. The numbers there don't add up quite right. We also like to point out that 90% voting turnout is unheard of. It's a little bit absurd to even think that you're going to get 90% of anybody showing up. So we kind of contest that, and we think there definitely needs to be some type of investigation. It shouldn't matter who you support. You should want the win to be a win. So if you're on the Biden side, I think it helps to have these investigations run their course. And should they fight through the courts properly, then I think Biden and his group stand on higher footing for any other type of legalities that come their way in the near future. It strengthens their resolve, so to speak. So I think Both sides should want these type of investigations, and I think the Democrats, if they don't want it, there is definitely something to hide. If they have nothing to hide, let's go ahead and investigate, find out if there was corruption, find out if people were using votes that weren't right. And time frames matter. When people say, this is the closing date for votes, that's the closing date and the closing time for votes. You have a tally time of when they can be counted in and brought in. There's no way elections should cost 3 days of our time. Fact of the matter is, we have an election day, keyword day, for a reason. And just like Bush and Gore, we're going to see a whole bunch of legalities put forth here to see who wins the actual election. And we do think Trump is going to end up at least flipping one of the states that he is going to contest. As far as we can tell, there are loads of evidence coming through that there is major fraud in the U.S. election. We feel like this is going to be long and drawn out and that it's far from over. We have insider intel that is actually telling us right now that the, quote, official ballots have a non-radioactive isotope watermark on them, and the, quote, fake ballots do not. There is talk of a possible military sting operation into this matter, and we wonder, could this be why the United States National Guard has been called? Seems to be more to all of this than what it appears. In Trump's defense, as well as Biden's, fair elections are the cornerstone of a democracy, or a republic, for that matter, because the United States is actually a republic. We feel like if this isn't done right, our democracy, our republic, has got to be through. They smeared the man for 4 years and then tried to steal an election from him. And I think it's kind of important to note that they have changed the Electoral College. They have changed the way we do elections, all to beat this man. They had to go through a giant leap of changes to try to win an election. And at this point, we're not calling it. We're not saying that Biden won. We're not saying that Trump won. Right now, what we are saying is that this is not through and the investigation has to get underway. This is the type of stuff that actually people call a banana republic. You hold a weapon against someone's head and you tell them, you have a free choice to pick whoever you want to. Just don't pick the wrong one. Or we're going to tell you to go vote and then we're going to lock the door. Or we're going to put out ballots where there's people's names on them that haven't even been alive for years. We still think there's a pretty good possibility that Trump wins Arizona as well. It's not honestly like we've seen the GOP representatives locked out of polling stations and thus prevented them from observing windows are boarded up, wheelbarrows of votes wheeled into stations in the early morning hours, ballot counters literally admitting on Twitter that they throw out Trump ballots. If everyone's paying attention, it's pretty obvious that fraud is indeed happening. I also want to point out 100% of registered voters actually voted in one county. That is a Joe Biden, come on man moment. That's not potential fraud, that's blatant fraud. 100% of registered voters actually voted in one county. So not one person in that county had a flat tire and couldn't get there. Not one person got the COVID and was at the hospital. Not one person had the flu, broke a leg, anything to keep them from going. All of the registered voters in that one county actually showed up. It's unheard of. We want to ask you all out there, is there any other country that you know of that does mail-in voting in large scale? We don't actually think there's another country out there. We've looked it up and we can't find any other country that does their voting via mail in any kind of large scale. There's small countries out there that do kind of do a thing like that, but there still are more checks and balances. This vote by mail crap isn't so good. There's a lot of corruption that can happen there, and this is one of the reasons why the Republicans were fighting so hard against it originally, because it's not a trustworthy thing. Coming in and actually voting requires someone to actually physically be there and put their 2 cents in. It allows an unending wave of whatever anybody can get anywhere on their computer at any time. So you can have anyone adjust anyone else's name in the world to a vote. As long as you have the ballot, you can put out whoever they are on the ballot and then send it in. There are workers that are literally saying they're going to throw out Trump ballots. So there's cooperation there, there's coercion, and there's a lot of people that are trying to find out the truth, but they're being locked out. They're not being allowed to watch. Some of these pollsters have been trying to watch the polls, but they're not allowed to watch once they closed up. And out of all of the polling stations in the country, only one polling station had any kind of real actual issue, like an actual physical issue, and that was leaky pipes. It flooded, they had to get out. That makes sense. They have an actual viable excuse. We think this whole entire thing is why the Democrats' number one priority since March has been mail-in votes. Think about it for a second. It was the one time in their total entire 4-year run that they weren't trying to particularly attack Orange Man back. It was the one time they found use for themselves other than attacking him. And that happened to be mail-in ballots. They petitioned so hard for these things. They wanted it done. They got it done. And now we're seeing the effect, the cause and effect of changes in an election. In most cases, the president who was in office the 4 years prior has a astounding advantage against the one that's coming in. We just find it funny that all of these rules, you win Florida, you win. All of these rules are thrown out just by mail-in ballots. And I think we change the tone of all of our elections by allowing governance to tell us how we elect people. We didn't get a vote in mail-in ballots. People in this country didn't get a vote on their votes. It's not right. It's not fair. Hopefully Trump wins most of his arguments here in court. I think he has a valid argument, at least with Arizona and at least with Pennsylvania, because some of those things do not look right. Out of all the registered voters, 100% showed up in any county is unheard of. Every single person, not one person had a problem, and we have a problem with that. The biggest problem is that the Democrats pushed the mail-in ballots because they knew that after the election, how many of those fake ballots they would actually need to win that election. And let's not be coy about this, let's be honest. They'll probably get away with it because they have these billionaires and really crooked media behind them. We promise, though, as soon as the Democrats can replace Joe Biden, they will, in one way, one form, or another. Joe Biden is not your president and not anyone's president at this point. He isn't elected in, but if he is, we do understand that they will not keep him around for very long. Pelosi established the 25th Amendment for a valid reason. Again, the Democrats don't waste their time on things that don't grant them extra or more power. And the 25th Amendment was not designed against Trump. It could not be employed against Trump. Just think about that for a second. When Pelosi added that 25th Amendment, by the time they were to actually go after Trump for having problems with medication while he's in office, the medication would have already wore off. And that's the reason why they didn't use it on Trump. But this allows for any president following Trump to have that same problem. And what do you want to bet that everybody in the underground version of the government knows Biden is on at least something? We have sites like Twitter and YouTube that are actually censoring this from coming to light. And I have a question. At what point does YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Twitch, all of these groups know for a fact that Joe Biden and the Democrats didn't cheat? I find it ironic that they know so well that they can censor political discourse because they know what's facts. How do you know what facts are if you haven't gotten to the end results, when you haven't even run the gambit yet? You haven't went day one in court and you're trying to say that this is all hyperbole, that this is all fake or conjecture, and that we should go ahead and censor these words because they're horrible words. America is a honest and true voting cycle country. But why is that you automatically assume because it's inflammatory? Because it aggravates Biden voters? At what point do you care about the conservative lifestyle or the Republican lifestyle? Just remember, folks, all of these people that went around talking about how tolerant they were as a liberal or a Democrat, Biden's going around calling people ugly. Hillary called every single conservative Republican on the face of the planet deplorable. So if you have a mom or an uncle or a dad or a brother that happens to be a Trump supporter, Hillary thinks they're deplorable. And if you understand how horrible that word is, pretty rough word. You see, the Democrats really do hate you if you don't have their values. It's not an idea of we have to get along and pick each other's brains and maybe learn from experience, whatnot. No, it's you will bow down to my ideologies. And if you don't, you're some kind of horrible person and we're going to attack you in some way, shape, or form. We think it's kind of funny that these states are being contested. And we knew all along that they were going to be contested. We knew there wasn't going to be any version of this that wasn't going to go to court. The Democrats were going to do something to change the system. They always do. And just like always, Trump's going to find some legal outing for their loophole. When you create a governmental loophole, you still open yourself up for people using that governmental loophole. At this point, there are actual whistleblowers speaking out. There are even Democrats themselves saying this exists. This is shady, this is scumbag behavior, and we think Democrats would rather have their power and watch democracy collapse. The media was always on the Democrat side. The moment they saw it in the news that Biden might possibly win, they jumped on it, and it's been like that ever since. And they're defending Biden now with the accusations against Trump. And again, we don't know. Trump's accusations, we don't know if they're honest or not. We have whistleblowers, we have information, and we need to get down to the bottom of it and actually investigate it for the country's sake. And if this stuff is actually factually going on, it needs to be dealt with in the highest regard because we'll never have fair, free elections ever again. We wouldn't be surprised if from here on out we don't see a Republican president for the next 2 election cycles. Not because Biden is a good candidate, but for the fact that they can run the gambit on the system and play it the way they want to and give themselves the handicaps that they need to win. If you notice, Democrat cities hardly ever flip, and it seems kind of funny because they're the ones that are taxing people. And we know that taxation is a quick method of getting voted out. But it is no secret, Trump has been calling out mail-in ballots for months. He knew exactly how this was going to play out. We also find it pretty fascinating that 2 districts in Milwaukee had over 200% voter turnout. Like we've said, the fix has to be in. If we turn our attention to Wisconsin, which is reporting a 90% voter turnout, considering dead people are still on the voter rolls and likely 20% or more of the residents simply didn't vote, we can officially call an ambiguous Pinocchio on this one. According to the Milwaukee City Wire, 90% voter turnout in Wisconsin explained as 7 Milwaukee districts report higher than 100. So 7 districts report higher than 100. So more people that are registered to vote voted. Does everyone get that? You have 100% of registered voters. You had over 200% voter turnout. To me, what that says is you either had 100% of brand new voters, you have 1/2 of the 200%, the quote 200%, but that 100 out of that 200 are votes of people who aren't registered to vote or they're new voters. Now, which is it? This is why this type of stuff needs to be investigated. This is why it's so important that we get this right. Because it's not fair to the rest of the country, and I guarantee you, had it been any closer in Hillary's race, the Democrats themselves would have done the same thing. No matter what type of group you affiliate yourself with. If you consider yourself an American, the elections have to be honest. Do you want to win because you won, or do you want to win because you conned everybody into it? Anyway, You guys have a good afternoon, a good morning, a good evening, whichever. Please like, share, and subscribe. We really do appreciate that around here. Also, drop a comment down below. We like to talk with you. We like to pick your brain. And if you have any ideas for new videos, go ahead, leave a comment down below. Also, don't forget to hit your notification bell. If you don't hit your notification bell, you're going to have a problem getting our videos sometimes. God bless each and every one of you. See ya.